I think one of the challenges you face as a leader in these organizations is recognizing that at the beginning, there's going to be a bunch of space in between that sort of fixed career path and the reality, the operational reality of a startup. But as that startup starts to mature, you're building the organizational lattice to enable that. So that was going to be my question. Is you're looking at the future. How are you thinking about maturing sort of the organizational structure to create those on-ramps in that space to sort of maybe meet people closer to where they are when they're transitioning out? I think the ability to look at sort of the analytical side, the ability to be at the practical application of technology side down in the operational community, and then sort of rounding out at that very strategic, how are we thinking about sort of next ridgeline type technology? What led you to Aalyria? And what are you guys working on? Because I think that's the cliffhanger now. Some folks will be like, well, that's a really interesting journey. What are you working now?
Yeah, so in that whole emerging technology, transition or path, we'll call it, one of the cool things, especially at InQtel, and then I got to hang out with Insight Partners for a little while. Insight Partners is a large venture capital company, kind of Series A through Series E, mainly in the SaaS world. They do have a couple of defense investments, though. But anytime you hang out with people in the venture capital community, what you find is they get to look at really new technology before anybody else. And so depending on their pipeline, they're getting decks every day, every week from brand new companies. If they're focused on seed stage, they start seeing companies that are really two people in a garage with an idea. No product yet. They're still building, but it's an idea. And when you see all of the latest and greatest ideas from really smart people, you get a feel for not only what's available now, but what technology is coming down the pipe. And then how to actually get it from two guys in a garage with an idea to a 100-person organization making, $100 million in ARR, and using VC capital to actually to facilitate and to really increase the velocity of that capital and technology. But in the end, you get to review a lot of new technology. I say that to say originally I thought I was going to jump out and jump immediately into venture capital. That's actually, a goal of mine later on. That's what I wanted to do. I realized that one of the key things once you invest in a company is you also need to help them. You got to help your portfolio companies. And I can help them with defense and I can help them understand these worlds. But I had never been part of a company that had gone from 2 people to 50 people. I'd never dealt with what HR system do you use and how do you figure out project management for the first time, and how do you build and scale not only the technology, but the people and the organization and the business processes. And I've done some of that in the military, but not in the same way as being in an actual company. So I figured that was a gap in my knowledge. And so I really started looking hard at trying to get to a small company so I could learn all of those processes and at the same time find a company that was doing something really great, because I enjoyed my time in national security and I wanted to make sure if I was going to focus all my time on something, it needed to be something I was passionate about. Yep. And I did a lot of soul searching when I was leaving the military, and I found the 2 things that I was passionate about was national security and helping people. And I figured I could do both of those better if I joined a company that had those same values. And so, like I said, I got lucky and found Aalyria just as they were coming out of stealth. And what the company does. So Aalyria is 2 things. So Aalyria came out of Google. They're not a Google company, but the technologies that we have came out of Google, and decades of research and development happened within Google and Google X. And so first is what we call Spacetime. It's a software orchestration platform. Essentially, if you see any graphic about JADC2, or you look at the future of really any government agency, there's a need for not only using bespoke government communications, because they have some really refined communications and waveforms and crypto, but then there's all this research and development and things happening on the commercial side. If you look at ISR, for instance, the DoD's had ISR for a long time. It's great ISR. But then Planet and Capella and ISI and all these companies sprung up and were able to actually put their own capability out there. Well, it'd be a shame to not take advantage of that capability. And so how do you do that at scale? And that's what Aalyria does with communications is connecting, link 16 to optical links to a KA or a KU or to any of the big SATCOM providers you can think of, and mixing that with LTE. So, when you're using your cell phone and you walk around in your house and you're on Wi-Fi, and then as soon as you leave, you're on LTE, but as a user, you really don't see a difference. That's what we're trying to do, not only for the DoD, but for commercial companies as well. And so that's half of the company is a bunch of engineers that have been working on these problems for a long time and actually solved many of them for Google, bringing that technology and really that team to the commercial market. And then there's another side, which is the deep tech hardware side, which is free space optics communication. And so if you think of, a fiber optic cable, at a certain point, the entire world moved from copper to fiber, and all of a sudden data started being transmitted through light. The same thing is starting to happen in the air. So everything we use right now is mainly RF. It's somewhere on the RF spectrum. It's great because we know how to use it. It's ubiquitous. We can use it everywhere. At the same time, there's a huge signature there. You can see RF. You can actually see it on a spectrum analyzer. There's limitations to what you can send. As we get into free space optical communication, our company focuses on building optical payloads. So we send that exact same data through light, but we send it through the air. And so I could be sitting here and talk to an aircraft 20 miles away and actually throw data rates above 100 gigabits a second, which is something you just can't do right now with RF.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of very interesting, I think, tech to unpack there. But what I think will be something interesting for the sort of the listeners here is you take that sort of awesome career, right? Cutting edge, looking at emerging tech, really understanding sort of how do the different gears work in the huge sort of institution. Mm-hmm. And then you come to sort of a commercial version, high flying, really interesting, bleeding edge tech. Where are you surprised as you turn around and look at, hey, all right, I played on this side for 23 years. I really was involved in all of the sort of innovation and tech scouting and that. And then you come to the commercial side. What's harder than you thought it would be? What's easier than you thought it would be? Because I think everyone maybe subtly in the back of their head is like, yeah, hey, I'll just hop on the other side of the table and it'll be great. I think deep down inside, everybody knows it's way harder than that. But I'd be really curious, sort of, what's your experience been so far there?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. One, especially, if you look at the higher level enlisted. So really, anytime you start managing people in the Air Force or in the DoD at large, you get to a point where you no longer get to do your actual job, your technical AFSC or MOS, and you really are a leader. And you could spend your entire time leading, managing people, going to staff meetings, doing the leadership functions. And if you don't try hard, it's going to be very difficult to stay technically proficient in whatever it is that you were originally trained to do. But over time now, that domain, that ops floor, that flight line, whatever it is, it progresses. It keeps moving forward. And what ends up happening is you end up being a leader who can't actually make well-informed decisions because you don't understand the technology as well as you did. And it's always a constant struggle because if you spend all your time on the flight line, on the ops floor, in the operational domain, there's a lot of things that aren't being taken care of. And so this is something that senior leaders always have to deal with. When you get to the outside, the commercial world, you may be an 06, an 07, an E9, an E8. You may be a senior leader, a senior manager, but then you come into, and especially at a startup level, you don't get to lead. There's no one for me to lead. My job is to do whatever the company needs. And this is where I think the special operations world, it's very similar. In the special operations world, everybody has their MOS or their AFSC. You have the thing that you're better at than everybody else. But at any time, and in one of the first instances I had to start working on radios. I'm not a radio operator. I'm an intel guy. But the mission at the time needed radio operations to work. I'm not as good as the people who know how to do it, but I can help. I can hold a flashlight. I can fill sandbags. I can do all the other things that need to be done to make the mission happen. Sometimes that may be digging into PDFs and learning, how do these radios work. And that mentality that allows you to or quickly switch from one job to another, and where no job is beneath you, and no job is really above your ability, you just need time to learn it, I think really translates well to the startup world because coming in, we brought a lot of engineers over from Google, but many of the team finds themselves, for an hour doing marketing, and then you're doing program management, and then you're doing project management, and then you're understanding, SCIFs and facilities and how those work, and then you're doing BD, and then by the way, you have to switch into a sales mode, and you have to do this all the time. You can't say, well, I'm not a sales guy, because the lifeblood of the company is the revenue. If you can't bring in revenue, you don't have a job tomorrow. And so everybody's a sales guy. Now, at some point, we will grow large enough and have this massive sales team and sales processes. But until that happens, everybody does everything. And I think deliberately I wanted to do that because it allowed me to get a lot of experience in different sectors of the startup world at the same time. Some stuff I like, some stuff I don't. And you get to learn that over time. So I think that's one of the things that some people have a hard time with, because they really want to come out and lead, but they don't realize that they don't have the technical knowledge, maybe the infrastructure knowledge, or even just the commercial, process flow knowledge. They can learn it quickly though if they have the right attitude, and if they have the will to learn. But I found that people do have a hard time with that when they transition if they're not thinking about that beforehand.
Yeah, it's funny. One of the lines we've always sort of used at Second Front is everybody does Windows, right? There's, to your point earlier, there's really no job that's sort of beneath or outside the reach of anybody. Everybody sort of does everything when it's required. That absolutely is a configuration challenge for folks that are coming out of an organization that's sort of predicated on like time and grade, your rank, like what is your role description? And it makes it challenging. I think it's important for folks to hear as you're thinking about sort of making a transition from a pretty rigid sort of institution into a startup. While a startup sort of sounds cool and I think it's glittery from afar, it's pretty chaotic internally and it's really unstructured. So if you are looking for, or you're very comfortable with like a fixed career progression and like this many years here, this many years here, this many years here, it's something you've got to sort of maybe reconsider or reevaluate. Not if a startup is right for you, just those expectations as you're transitioning.
Yep.
And then coming in, I think one of the challenges you face as a leader in these organizations is recognizing that at the beginning, there's going to be a bunch of space in between that sort of fixed career path and the reality, the operational reality of the startup. But as that startup starts to mature, you're building the organizational lattice to enable that. So that was going to be my question: is you're looking at the future. How are you thinking about maturing sort of the organizational structure to create those on-ramps and that space to sort of maybe meet people closer to where they are when they're transitioning out?
Yeah. So there's a few ways. Because I've built and I've been in large organizations, I do understand some of the needs of a large organization. How do you onboard new employees and how do you onboard new people to your unit? I mean, it's essentially the exact same thing. And so, as I'm going through my learning journey and understanding what do I need to do, I'm quickly building, what are the TTPs for a new employee? And not for the entire company, but for somebody in my section kind of focused on BD and the public sector side. What are the things that, our CTO said that I thought was amazing, and so I start putting all my words of wisdom down. And what is that random YouTube video that I watched that really helped it hit home for me? And slowly that will turn in to our, to my onboarding guide for this section of the company. Because if you're going to understand, the program in the public sector side, you need to not only understand the DoD, and government at large, but you need to understand this technology. Because one of the things, and I think you guys probably run into the same issue, some larger companies, you have a BD team that goes out and they talk and they drive in hopeful leads essentially, or you have cold sales teams that go out and drive leads. And at some point you get to a technical exchange. You bring in your engineers and technical account managers, and they have more of a whiteboard session. Almost every meeting I'm in, engineering pops up very quickly. And so if I said, I can't do that, let me wait until I can get the engineers, I delay a month, I delay 2 months, I might never talk to the person again. And so I can't be a public sector guy and not be an engineer. And I didn't build this product. We have amazing engineers that built it, but I have to soak up as much information as I can from them and harness their knowledge and harness their power so that quickly I can get to a mid-level of depth in our conversations. So the customer comes back going, okay, I got what I needed. And then at a certain point, we're way beyond my ability and we get a qualified engineer that actually built the program and built the line of code that we're talking about. But if I said, that's not my job, I don't know how to do that more than once, and you can say, I don't know how to do that the one time, and then you spend the rest of the next, week learning it, I can't be successful. And so it's another issue with people coming in, but hopefully what I can do is start to build that. I can't wait until I can start bringing in SkillBridge interns as well. But I need the company to be at a point where we can bring in a SkillBridge intern and not take advantage of them, but actually make sure that they have a worthwhile process and procedure, as opposed to bringing them in and just letting them do busy work for us. I need to build the right training program.
Free labor.
Correct. Because now I got to be back in the eyes of a veteran getting out.
Yeah.
what do they need to know?
Yeah,
I need to get them in marketing for a little bit. I need to get them in BD. I need to get them with the technical teams. They need to leave way smarter than I found them, or I'm doing a disservice to the veteran, to my company, and to the SkillBridge program at large.